This is Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? Oh, for the listeners who listen to this show each and every week, you're probably like, Molly, do you just have a lineup of people from Mississippi on your show? Because last week we had Ellen Scrimeti, and this week we have Sophie Hudson. Sophie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly. I appreciate it. Listen, I'm happy to be part of the Mississippi tag team. Happy to be a duo with Ellen. She is a delightful person. So I know you had fun talking to her.
So delightful. Well, Sophie, I'm so excited about this. And we were talking before we got recording, and I was like, I gotta just hit record on this. So we were talking about accents, and you were talking about how that Mississippi accent is very distinct. And I was like, I just even feel like in the few moments that we're talking, I'm like, a North Carolina accent is coming out a little bit. And how and people that aren't from the South don't necessarily understand this. And like, I'm actually maybe just a little bit nerdy when it comes to this. Is like, I'm really fascinated by accents and linguistics and stuff like that.
Oh, me too. Me too.
You hear that accent, you're like, that's from Mississippi. Or you hear that, like, they are from the mountains of North Carolina. Like, you can hear it. It's fascinating.
Oh yeah, I took a whole class. I think I was in grad school. Maybe I was not. Maybe it was undergrad, but it was called sociolinguistics. The whole semester was just about how our accents and our the phrases that we use, the idioms that are that are specific to our regions, how those things form, how they take hold, and then how they go away. And so I can remember, like, as a 21-year-old thinking, but I can't imagine what would happen. What would that be like if my accent went away? And then as it turns out, no, because it's not. I can't, even when I try to sound, maybe a little less Southern for the benefit of the people who are listening and who aren't used to it. It's so deeply ingrained in me. I mean, it just, at this point, it's a done deal, right?
It's like a fly on glue. Like it
really is. 100%. Yeah. It's just, there is no hope. There is not a coach in the country who works on such things who would have any success with me. So,
okay. Have you heard this? Because I heard this sometime in the last year. I don't know if it was like on a documentary or something where they studied, like, as they've studied accents and things like that, that the Southern Appalachia region accent is what they think is actually most closely related to, like, the British accents of, like, the 1600s, that the British accents of today, they didn't actually sound British. They sounded like Appalachian Southern.
Yes, I can't remember where I read something about that. And I remember at the time thinking, I want to do a deeper dive here. And then I forgot. But now I want to do a deeper dive there. I want to go back and read about that.
I like picturing the founding fathers, or like the people like the people coming over on the Mayflower being like, I can't do an Appalachian Southern Mountain accent. But even I'm saying, like, let's just even say they sound like they're from Mississippi, where they're like, oh, look up there.
Yeah. Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all. There's some land up ahead.
Yeah. Y'all come over here.
Like, I like picturing the members of the Whig Party.
The Whig Party. Yes. You don't really think of the people in the Whig Party sounding more like Tyler Childers, really, than, like King George.
Jelly Roll.
Yeah. They sound like Jelly Roll. That's exactly right. That's fantastic. This could really be like a whole side hobby if we really wanted to dig in. I could cast that thing,
Yes.
Just give me about 5 minutes and Google.
I don't know. Because I'll be honest, I don't know any famous people in the Whig Party, but.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Just, I'm making Jelly Roll the leader of the Whig Party. Like, it's
100% with the best costume lately.
Yes, like with the jacket with the what's the flare thing on the back,
Oh yeah, I can't think of what the tail, but I can't. But it's called a morning coat. But I can't remember what that. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know the technical fashion term.
A morning coat.
I don't know. It's, again, Mississippi, right? Because if you got married before noon, the men in your wedding had to wear morning coats. That's how I remember. My
Oh,
husband wore a morning coat when we got married.
re-
Yeah.
okay.
We got married at 10 in the morning. And so it was there was a whole like, it's so weird because we just don't live in this world anymore. But there was a whole like, what was acceptable and unacceptable for everybody to wear because it was a morning wedding. Now, did anybody really care? No. Listen, we were in the east central part of Mississippi. This is not a mecca for, I mean, it kind of actually is now that I think about it, but for etiquette. But anyway, yeah, there was a whole thing. Like you couldn't wear a tux. You had to wear a morning coat. So I
I'm
don't know.
fascinated by this. I will be honest, Sophie, I have never attended a wedding prior to like 4 p.m., 3 p.m. maybe.
I'm trying to remember why we ended up doing that. We were, by the time we got married, I was the last of like my college friends to get married. I think I had been in something like 13 or 14 weddings at that point.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do was get married. I was not as interested in the wedding part. I had been to a lot of weddings. I had been in a lot of weddings. I
Yeah.
wanted to get married. So in talking to my parents, I was like, what if we did this thing earlier in the day and had brunch, and then David and I are out. We're gone by like 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And they thought that was great. And so that's what we did. And honestly, I loved it. It
Yeah.
just was a little less formal, a little less of an obligation to entertain the masses, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really loved it. And everybody still had the rest of their Saturday when it was over. So I don't know.
I mean, honestly, like I said, never been to one, hadn't heard of one.
Yeah.
Big fan of it. As somebody who likes to be in bed by like 8:30 these days,
Absolutely. Yes.
a brunch wedding, I am
Yeah.
here for it.
Yeah. Last night, our son's roommate was over here. They go to school here in Birmingham. They're at Sanford, but we try to pretend like they're far away so we have good
Yeah.
boundaries.
Right.
But his roommate's from Texas, and so every once in a while he'll just drop by because he just, it's just like a house, to sit and visit. And
Yeah.
I had some friends over, and so he dropped by just to visit for a little while. But honestly, like I looked at the clock at one point and it was 9:15, and I thought, what am I even doing? Who do I think I am?
I know.
It's 9:15 and I'm
9:15.
sitting here in the kitchen all willy-nilly, like, just,
Oh.
I've really conditioned myself to be an early bedtime person, and I don't mind it either.
No,
I
I
do
don't
not mind it.
at all.
Mm-mm.
I just, I'm very much at a stage where so my kids right now are 11 and 8, and
Okay.
they are at the age where they don't want to go to bed. And
Right.
I say to them all the time, I was like, do you know how much I would just love for someone to beg me to go to sleep?
Oh, it's the same irony of nap time, right? That we
Yes.
force this nap time when kids are little. When everybody needs a nap time is when they're teenagers.
Yeah.
That's when everybody needs a nap time.
Yes.
And I will tell you now that I'm an empty nester. I just about every day give myself the gift. I don't necessarily go to sleep, but I practice siesta. I will tell you that, Molly. I will retreat about 2:00 in the afternoon
Mhm.
for about an hour. It may just be that all I'm doing is looking at TikTok. Like that may be it. But I love the whole notion of just taking a minute just to lie down.
Yeah.
Can we lie down? And I say all the time, I do Pilates, and I always say my favorite thing is you get to the studio, you take off your shoes, you put on your little grippy socks, and you lie down.
And
That's
you
the
get to-
most promising exercise situation there is, where you start off in recline. That feels right for me. And I'm so grateful that that's what the Lord has for me at this point in my life.
I received that.
Yes.
In fact,
Yes.
So I just started a couple weeks ago. I started grad school. I'm going to seminary.
Good for you.
Thanks. And but my husband was like, the other day, he just texted me randomly, and he's like, could we do it like or you should do it like you're in kindergarten, like you're in school again, and you get a nap and a snack every day. And I was like, this might be the greatest idea you've ever had.
Listen, pack your little mat. Take it, like, just stretch it out. Just take you a nap. I'm all for it. I think we would be a kinder, more compassionate society.
That part, Sophie.
Honestly, if we would just take a minute every day and collect ourselves, right?
Yes.
Collect ourselves nap for a moment, do what recharges you, and then re-enter the world.
Well, I think about like, every time, like, let's just say hypothetically, one of my children is having big feelings. Let's just
Yeah.
throw that out there as a hypothetical.
May or may not happen.
May or may not happen.
Right.
Where sometimes I have to like take said child aside and kind of hold cup said child's face and say, it seems like your body is
Perhaps.
you might need to go to your room for a little bit and calm your body down and then come back out. And when your body's calm. And sometimes like there are some people in our country and our nation, like in leadership, who sometimes I just want to say, you seem like you need to go calm your body down.
Right. Yeah. I used to tell our son when he was little, I would say, hey, how about just 3 laps around the house? Just 3 laps. I think maybe that could be a strategy in places of leadership. I think sometimes we have people in places of leadership who need like 3 laps. Just, just get it out of your, just
do this. Actually, you did this too. I literally look at my son
and I'll tell you what,
run a lap.
It works. It works. It works. There is something we were talking to a friend about this last night. And you're right in sort of the beginning of that wheelhouse. Physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
If you have kids, I would say from 3rd grade up through the end of high school, like everybody's life is going to be better if those kids and the adults too, but specifically those kids have time for dedicated physical activity. It solves a world of hurts and grievances and pressures. It's critical.
Incredible. Yes. Mm-hmm. I just love that this is a universal thing. Like, because in some ways I didn't know that other moms did this, but the fact that you send your son outside to run laps, I totally do that, where I just look at my son and I go, hey baby, I need you to run. And so like we have a really long driveway. Like if you run up and back, or up like from the end of the driveway to the end is like almost a quarter of a mile. So I just am like, I want you to go run up and back like a couple times. Like go run.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Up and down that driveway.
Yeah. What I love about kids, I mean, when else in life do you go, okay? Like, can you imagine?
It'll be like, okay. And then you just like throw the shoes on.
And then they're off. Because can you imagine as an adult, like if you had a boss who was like, hey, I need you to take a lap around this office complex. And you're like, all right, got it. Like, I love that kids will go, yeah, on it. And then and then they're running. Here we go. We're moving.
Oh my gosh, here we are. We're 12 minutes in and I haven't even gotten the Sophie 101. I knew this was going to be the best way to start my day.
Listen, I'm always delighted to chase a rabbit. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. I mean, it's exact. I mean, why do you think I named my show what I did?
Sure.
I love it so much. Okay. Well, we are going to rein it back in somewhat, even though I would love to do this literally all day, but clearly we need to actually talk also about why you're here on the show. So briefly, since we've already gotten to know the fact that you're from Mississippi, you make your son run laps and you enjoy laying down at Pilates.
That's right.
The Sophie 101. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so my name is Sophie Hudson. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, and have for, at this point, I think 24 years.
Awesome.
I'm a writer. It took me a really long time to say that. It's just a complete sentence and not try to over-explain it.
There you go.
But like back in 2005, I started a blog on a whim, literally one night at 8:00, and just started to write every day again. I had missed it because I have loved it my whole life. And just over the course of the last almost 20 years, it's just sort of been a process of doing the next thing. So I started a blog. Through that blog, I met my friend Melanie Schenkel, who's also a writer. She lives in San Antonio. Back in 2007, one day, my husband heard us on the telephone and he was like, y'all should do a podcast. And we were like, what's that? And I went to CompUSA, which was the thing back then. I bought a microphone. Yes. Melanie went to Best Buy. She bought a microphone. We started a podcast in 2007 that we still do now called the Big Boo Cast. That's a huge part of my life at this point. It's been the most unexpected gift that kind of turned out to be my job. But I worked in at a Christian school here in Birmingham for about 21 years. First as an English teacher, and then I worked with the girls for the last 7 years, just kind of in the day-to-day discipleship kind of things. I left that job about 3 years ago to write and podcast kind of full time. And back, I don't even remember the year, but I started writing books after we started the podcast. Kind of the blog morphed into, writing for different magazines and stuff like that. And then I started to write books, which was a huge surprise to me because I never thought that was anything I would do. And as of yesterday, which one is that? I wrote a book called A Fine Sight to See, Leading Because You Were Made for It. It's my 7th book, and it came out yesterday. So there you have it.
So good. Sophie, we have way more in common than I even realized. Like blogging back in the day. Like, did you start on LiveJournal? That was where I started.
I did not start. I started on Blogspot. So it was boomama.blogspot.com. And then I got my own domain, but .com was not available. So I've always been a .net girl.
Love it.
I don't know if the .com is available now. And I don't blog really anymore because I have to save the words, for books.
Yeah.
But we do put like our show notes on our blogs and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's great training,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think apart from the blog, I don't know how or where I would have been disciplined enough or even incentivized enough to write every day. But it was so fun. Even if you had 3 people who would read a blog post, it was so fun to get feedback and to have, the blog comments back in the day were a party. They were a carnival.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. And so I moved from LiveJournal to WordPress in like 2007.
The WordPress now, that was highfalutin.
Well,
WordPress.
It was free WordPress at first.
Okay.
And then I moved eventually in like 2010 to like paid WordPress. But so from like 2005 to 2010, it was all in the free spaces. But it was like the commenting world was a whole thing. And then you would comment, and then you would link your blog, and then they'd like link up parties. And then
everybody had like a blog roll of here's the stuff I read.
Here's the blog that I read.
And that's how my friend Melanie and I met. She read my blog. She left a comment. I laughed at her comment. And so I wrote her back, which all feels like a very prolonged sort of eHarmony situation. But we just hit it off. Our lives were really similar at the time. Yeah. And it was like we emailed back and forth for a year, and then we finally talked on the phone. And but then after we talked on the phone, our work lives started to line up, where we would see each other a lot.
Right.
But back then it was so weird, to like hang out on the internet. Everybody thought that was so strange. And I was kind of concerned about telling my friends here in Birmingham, like, hey, I've met this person on the internet. Her name is Melanie.
Real creepy.
And we've gotten to be really good friends. Like, it was all so weird, but anyway, it worked out.
I know it is funny because I do have internet friends who have become in real life friends. And then whenever I talk about them, and I'm always like, yeah, so we met on the internet, and and then we met up at a coffee shop. Or
That's right.
Like, and it's like,
that's right.
Did you bring like a security guard with you?
That's right. Well, because back when I started blogging, we didn't even tell our names. We just went. I mean, I didn't. It was only when I started podcasting that I was like, my name is Sophie, but I didn't give my last name because we just had this perception that everybody was just sitting on like, I don't know, whitepages.com waiting to look you up, kind of stand outside your door, which is actually, people actually are not that interested. But it was so fun. It was so fun. It was a very specific little period of time. And
I loved it. I love that. Well, congratulations again on the release of your 7th book. I've got my copy here, A Fine Sight to See, Leading Because You Were Made for It. And Sophie, so I confessed that I am in grad school. So I'm doing a lot of reading right now, but I did start your book, and I'm about halfway through and loved it.
Thank you.
And I think not only clearly because we have very similar, I think, writing styles, personalities, senses.
Yes.
So I relate to your style of writing. But also because I just feel like it is, it's funny, it's deep. And then it also has such insight and beauty. And so for the readers, and so you kind of give this backdrop of women in leadership and why women are called to leadership in different spaces, but you approach it from such a unique perspective by looking at the first 20 chapters of the book of Exodus.
I know, it's weird.
Oh, interesting. Like, I have to ask, like, how did you land on Exodus 1 through 20 as
Listen,
your backdrop for a book on women in leadership?
I know. Listen, Molly, it was only the Lord. Here's the deal. I love Moses. And I don't say that in a weird way. Like, I'm fascinated by Moses.
Mm-hmm.
And have been for a long time. And my son would tell you that every time I read the part of scripture where Moses dies, I cry. And he's always like, hey, he calls me Soph. And he's always like, hey, Soph, happened a minute ago, like that.
Okay.
Not a shocker. But so I love Moses. And I was kind of stuck in my head. You'll get like kind of stuck on this one passage of scripture. And it feels like it applies to tons of different parts of your life. And so you start looking at life through the lens of that little passage of scripture. I did that with part of Exodus for about a year. I was also in a different lane, really preoccupied with the notion of healthy leadership and what it looks like. And how do we demonstrate that in the church, and how do we not demonstrate that in the church? And then the piece of how we, let me say this our views toward women in the church, and the vast array of perspectives on that was also on my mind. And I think because I worked with younger women for so long, I just really want them to feel like there's a place for them and for their gifts in the church, but maybe increasingly discouraged by the ways that we continue to fight about it. And fight about what that would look like. And I'm not interested in fighting. Like, I'm not, listen, I say this in the book, if your convictions are rooted and grounded in love, you can have them. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. But here's what happened. I was going through the book of Exodus. I read through the whole book on a flight to Houston because I thought, I want to see what's here. Like, why am I stuck here? And it was early, like the first 2 chapters, I started to notice that the word see, S-E-E, is repeated over and over and over. And the people who are seeing early on in Exodus are women. And as I read through it, there was just this like, oh, Moses's life is bookended. Like, you see it at the very beginning, you see it all the way through it, and then you see it especially again at the end. His life is bookended by the language of sight. And the first people in Moses's life who could see, his mom saw that he was a fine baby. His sister saw when he was left in the Nile because of Pharaoh's decree. Pharaoh's daughter saw him in the Nile. Miriam, his sister, saw Pharaoh's daughter see him. There's all this sight that goes on. And then when Moses grows up and he walks outside, scripture says he saw in a Hebrew and Egyptian fighting, and then he doesn't use his sight redemptively. And he kills a guy, which we don't recommend. That's not a great decision. And so then he spends the next 40 years kind of in the repair work that's necessary after you make that kind of decision. But all that to say, this language of seeing, and I do believe we're meant to learn from everybody in scripture. And so there was something about looking at the life of Moses from that perspective where I was like, oh, he's all of us. He is all of us in terms of the mistakes, the resistance to leadership, the bargaining with God about, hey, I'll do this, but not that. The certainty with God that, like, I don't think I'm actually the man for this job. And I just related to it in such a way. And I thought, I think Moses is a leadership manual for all of us, women or men. I just happen to be talking about women in this book.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously there's a lot there that I want to unpack, but I have to ask this question.
Okay.
Have you seen the pilot for The Promised Land?
No.
Sophie. Okay. So are you a fan of comedies such as The Office / Parks and Recreation?
Indeed.
Okay. So there's a guy who created a show. All that's released right now is the pilot. You can
look at the expression on my face right now, by the way.
I'm just we're about to get into it real quick.
Okay.
This is vital. This is vital. So and you'll understand why in a minute. So it's the guy who created it. Well, anyway, I'm not going to get into the rabbit holes of but he like worked on The Chosen. So he's legit, like a legit creator.
Okay.
So he loves comedies and he's a Christian, and he's like, why have we never seen a Christian comedy? Like, why haven't we ever seen one? And so he created this show called The Promised Land, and it is a mockumentary style, like The Office, Parks and Rec, based on Moses and Exodus. Sophie,
how do I watch this?
Okay, the pilot is out right now. It's on YouTube, so you can watch episode 1. It's only I think 30-ish minutes long. So the problem is, though, I have to bear bad news. That's the only episode that's out right now because they did it as a test. They released it July 1st, and then they basically wanted to see, like, did people like this? People loved it. And so they are filming the full first season right now, and it should come out in the spring. But when I tell you, like, the casting is incredible, but it's like the legit story. So, like, in the pilot, you're just kind of like thrown into the desert. They're like, but you see Zipporah, Moses's wife, coming up from Midian, and like they always talk about Moses's sons, but you never see them. And then there's like a random Egyptian who like ended up on the other side of the Red Sea, but he's trying to blend in with the Israelites. And like there's like other Israelites that are kind of like, are you one of like what's your camp? What tribe are you from? And like like
Ben.
Oh my god. And Miriam is my favorite because she's really annoyed with Zipporah, but then she talks about how she's like a musical savant, and like she goes up on the mountain with, like, tambourines and stuff.
Tubi, she had a gift.
I know.
She had a gift. Okay, I can't wait. This is going to be my reward to myself at the end of today.
Please watch it. Okay, Sophie, and I'm serious. Like, I need you to just then message me after you watch it, because we need, like, I don't know very many other people who have watched it, but when I was reading your book, I was like, I really hope Sophie has seen the program.
Oh, I had no idea this was even a thing.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I cannot wait.
Yes. But it's like really well done. It has heart, but then, like I said, it's filmed exactly like so you get the you know, one-on-ones, and then the look to camera. I mean, it's chef's kiss. It's so good.
Cannot wait.
Yes.
Listen, I'll take any iteration of any story about Moses and company.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
You will love it.
Lord, let it be that this becomes a musical, right?
Yes.
Lord, would you inspire your people, Lord, to set this thing to song?
And an opening dance number.
And an opening dance number? Yes. I mean, the Book of Mormon can only run for so long.
I know.
This feels like the heir apparent.
Yeah.
If somebody should feel so led.
I'm going to start singing CeCe Winans "Believe" for it. I believe for it. I believe
100%. Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about how this is a book on leadership, but you're speaking specifically to women.
Mm-hmm.
So as you were kind of beginning to outline this, because like you said, you're like, I'm not interested in fighting. I'm not interested in changing anyone's opinion. And I think you have, again, you approach this subject from such humility. Why do you think it is that, I mean, obviously we know, like, women in especially in Christian leadership over the years, like there's a lot of discussions around that, but why do you think it is that deeply, one of the things you talk about, how women and girls are often hesitant to recognize their unique giftings. They're hesitant to even step into those and to pursue those because they think like I'm not qualified. I'm not able to do this.
Yeah, that's one of the ways I think where Moses is all of us, you know, because I think we do the same thing. And I think we see it more in our present day. And I know some of this is regional, some of this is denominational, you know, some of this is dependent on our particular church cultures. But here's sort of my overarching awareness that has kind of seeped in over the last several years is we typically in our church spaces do not use the language of leadership to refer to our women. Mm-hmm. We use the language of leadership for men. Listen, we need men to lead, but we also need women to lead. Mm-hmm. And women are underrepresented in leadership in our churches. We don't have to get into that today, but we don't use the language of leadership for women. We use the language primarily when it comes to women of helping and serving, dare I say, even submitting. And I think because of that, and I don't think it's necessarily a malicious tendency, but I think what happens over time is you have these things that you love and that you're passionate about. And what starts to happen is you just tamp it down. You just tamp it down because there's not room for that necessarily. Yeah. I'm not sure how to use that in this context. I'm just going to tamp it down because what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to help and to serve. Now, listen, helping and serving, absolutely leadership. For some people, that's the primary way that their leadership shows up in the world. We need helpers and servers. But I also think that It's part of this tendency we have where as women, what we learn sometimes in our church spaces is that our job is to be winsomely deferential, is what I
Mhm.
call it in the book. We learn how to fit into that system, whereas there is absolutely recognition in those systems that we've, as believers, been given good gifts. We don't always have permission to lead with them.
Yeah.
So it affects, I think, how not only how you perceive yourself, but how you use the gifts that God has given you in the world. Now, in a more corporate environment, you're going to be rewarded for that.
Right.
I mean, those gifts are more welcome there. And for some of us, our primary leadership is going to be in our workplaces. But I think even like when I think about, women who may be in the stage of being home with young kids or, just a stage in their lives where their primary responsibilities are tied, let's say, to motherhood. We don't talk about the leadership of motherhood. We
Mm.
talk about the sacrifice of motherhood. We talk about the surrender of motherhood, which, yes, it's those things, but it's also leadership. Because
Right.
if you have influence over one other person, you're a leader in that
Yeah.
person's life. And I think it's important that we call a thing a thing. Why don't we talk about the leadership of motherhood?
Mm.
There are few people in a child's life who are more influential, more impactful, and whose legacy will ripple forever. But we don't talk about it in terms of leadership. And so I think if it's going to change, I think we got to own it a little bit more. And I think we may have to start doing that for ourselves as opposed to just waiting around for organizations to do that for us.
Yeah. So I'm curious because as you were talking, and this is kind of something that I personally, so maybe this is a little bit of a selfish question, but it's my podcast, so I'm gonna do what I want. So
Absolutely.
this is something I have been chewing on myself a little bit lately. Is the difference between leading confidently or
Hmm.
even using your gifts confidently. Like how do you own something confidently, like being like, yes, I did this well,
Hmm.
I am skilled in this area, I, you know what I mean, and also exhibiting the Christian character quality of
Right.
humility.
Letting the fruit of the spirit seep into that thing
Right. And like
so that
this is
there's
a thing I'm
humility.
genuinely like, I
Yeah.
don't know what that looks like. And I don't because like so I had a conversation with my husband the other day and like we were kind of talking about Christian character qualities and things like
Hmm.
that. And I would have said about myself, and this is probably the hilarious
Hmm.
irony, is that I possess the quality of humility. Not
Yeah.
perfectly, but I would say that I do.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my husband said, I don't know that you do. And
Okay.
I was like, really?
Listen, and you said that, listen, how you feel about that's none of my business. You don't have to.
But I literally like at first, and it actually ended up being a great conversation for the two of us
Yeah.
because I was like, unpack that with me. Cause like, I was
Yeah.
like, and then so it's just been something I've been chewing on. It's not like he was being like, you're an
Oh,
arrogant,
listen,
you
I
know,
get it.
but that wasn't it. It was more like, I don't know that you do. Like, I think that there are some times that you are like, you know, that you killed something. But he's like, but
Uh-huh.
even I don't know if what the difference between like confidence in the thing that you've done is versus exhibiting humility. And I
Yeah.
don't, again, I don't have the answer. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think it's a super important distinction. I mean, I don't want to say I've wrestled with this very same thing, but I've thought a lot about it. And here's where I've landed. I think that we have to look at what the end goal of the leadership is.
Mm.
Because a lot of times I think our perception is that leadership, if we're in a position of leadership, then we can judge our success at that by the amount of control we have
Mm.
and the amount of power we have. I would say no to that. I would say that is actually not the kind of leadership that 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 results in more humility for us, right? If we're after power and control, it's that's going to be more ego driven. I don't believe leadership with an end goal of power and control is leadership that can result in humility because it's only going to elevate the self. So here's what I would say. I think that when we can look at our leadership, the places where we lead, and to be clear, like there's a notion of leadership that's all about who's got the loudest voice, who's got the
Right.
power in the room, who's telling everybody what to do. That's not the kind of leadership that I'm referring to at all, because I'm just talking about the leadership of influence, of being in a position to call other people to higher and better. And I think when the end goal of that kind of leadership is deliverance as opposed to power, then I think we can exercise our leadership and know that we have done that in humility, because we're not after some result that's tied to us. We're after a result that points people in the direction of God. We're after leadership that reminds people of who God is and who God has made them to be, and how he has invited them to cooperate in shining his light in the world. And I don't just say that like as an English major who likes the symbolism, of being salt and light in the world. I say that really sincerely, because I think if our goal is deliverance, right? Not that it's our job to do the delivering, but we want the people that we impact to be increasingly more free.
Right.
I believe that that helps in this mission of humility, because we're after ultimately something that only God can do. And if we'll keep that in perspective, I think maybe the humility piece will fall in a little bit easier. But it's tricky, because I'll tell you what, a little control can feel like fun.
Yeah.
And it can also feel fun when you feel like, as a result of this leadership, maybe you're a little bit more known, right? Maybe your platform becomes a little bit more public. I think that's the stuff we have to guard against, because that's not, in the end, if we're talking about trying to bear the fruit of the Spirit, that stuff's not going to bear good fruit.
Yeah. I really love that distinction that you illustrated, the idea of like, what is the end goal? Like, what is the end result you're seeking when, and that sometimes just takes personal inventory.
I would say ruthless personal inventory.
Personal inventory.
Yeah, because I think, here's the deal. If your heart's desire for leadership is deliverance, to me, what that indicates is a posture where we get real low. We get so low because we just want to do the thing that is the most helpful for the person or the people where we have influence. But when our end goal is control or power, I think we tend to elevate ourselves in that, right? Because we're trying, it's like when you see the poster for Aladdin, and it's, it's like the genie coming out of the bottle, and we're just like, we just want to cover everything. We want our hands on everything.
Right.
And so I think when we're talking about leadership that results in power or control, I think that inflates our sense of importance. I think leadership pointed in the direction of deliverance. I think it's much easier to keep God in his proper place and for us just to get low and do whatever groundwork he calls us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always go back and I try to say that, like, I say this verse to myself all the time, is like, I go back to John the Baptist, like, may you increase as I decrease. May you increase as I decrease. And I feel like that the more that we pray that and we fix our minds on that notion of like, the thing that I'm about to do, Lord, may you increase and may I decrease. And he will humble you real fast.
Listen, Melanie and I were starting the podcast. I mean, this was forever ago. This was over 15 years ago. But we ran across, I can't even remember why, but the verse that says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life and work with your hands.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think that means that God wants me to become a potter, right? I don't necessarily think that means I'm supposed to learn how to carve. But
Whittle.
I'm going to tell you, if that doesn't stay in the back of my mind all the time, because I think we're not as comfortable with leadership and quiet life going in the same sentence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can be a leader and live a quiet life. It's all about the posture of your heart. So if I feel myself getting away from myself a little bit sometimes, as we all do, deliverance, that's God's work.
Yeah.
Deliverance is God's work. Clearly, all through scripture.
Yeah.
Talk to Moses about that. Talk to Jesus about that. God's work is deliverance. That's not my work to do.
Yeah.
So what do? I get low. I get quiet. I work with my hands. And that, I think, is the posture. We hear this phrase, servant leadership, all the time. I don't even know if we know what that means anymore. But that, to me, is the posture of a leader who knows where their place is and who knows what their role is.
Yeah. Well, then kind of my follow-up question to all of that is, okay, so if we take all of these things into mind, and I know that you dive deep into this in your book,
Yeah.
but if we have all of these things in mind, if we have humility, if we have
Mhm.
getting low, if we have all of these things in the back of our mind about we can lead while also living a quiet life, what
Mhm.
do you say, or what tip do you offer to women who are struggling with this and who want to lead with confidence in a healthy way? Like, is there something that can be done like today, this weekend, or just in practice? Like,
Mhm.
I love the idea of like spiritual practices, that because
Yes.
we have to practice regularly.
Mhm.
So what's a spiritual practice that women can begin to employ? Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't
That's a
know.
great word,
You
Molly.
know?
That's a
Yeah,
great word.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know what? The first thing that popped in my head, because I love this idea of spiritual practices too. Here's the deal. I think a lot of times when we feel like we kind of get away from ourselves when we're in leadership capacities is when we are actually trying to do things that we're not meant to do,
Mm-hmm.
that we're not necessarily good at doing, but for some reason we're in a spot where guess what? I have worked myself into a situation where I am in charge of this thing. It makes us afraid, it makes us panicky, and when we are afraid and panicky, we get real controlling.
Yeah.
Typically, that's how human beings operate. So here's what I would say. I would say, how can you practice the things that light you up from the inside out? How can you, because that is where your most natural leadership will be, an overflow of that place.
Right.
How do you invest little pieces of time in the thing that you have always loved to do, or the place where you have always felt naturally inclined, or the thing that, like, if your friends hear you get started on this topic, they're going to be like, well, here we go, because we're going to be here for a minute.
We're gonna be here for a minute. We'll get comfortable.
Which is actually, I feel like, where most of my friends here in Birmingham have lived with me on this topic of leadership for the last probably 8 or 9 years.
Mm.
Like, if I get going on leadership, here we go, y'all. Get a drink and a snack because
Put
you're gonna
on your
need to
stretchy
refuel.
pants.
Yeah. So I would say, I think a great spiritual practice for humble leadership is to practice using your gifts in private.
Mm.
Practice using your gifts not for some means to an end, but because the Lord has given you this thing, whatever this thing might be, it's going to be life-giving to you. It's not going to be draining when you get to use it. I don't know if you feel this way, but like, when I get to just dedicate some time to writing, about whatever I want to write about,
Yeah.
the time never moves quicker than that. And I am usually never more energized. That's not to say it won't be hard at times. But I think what when I look back, what I was doing in 2005, 2006, 2007, and I didn't know, was the spiritual practice of writing, which was doing the thing that lit me up from the inside out from the time that I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
I made time for it. And I know it's so hard. And I'm so sympathetic to how difficult it can be to find time. So what time looks like, if you're thinking, well, I want time to invest in whatever the thing is that I love to do. It may be a little bit of time a week. It may be one day a month. It may be that once a quarter you get to retreat for a day or two and do that thing. But I think when we prioritize the practice of the gifts we've been given, think that leadership is the natural overflow of that.
Man, Sophie, that's so good. That is so good. Man, we're running out of time, and I just want to have you
Well,
on this show for so long because I
I'm
just love
I'm
you.
real sad that we're running out of time,
Me
Molly.
too.
I'm very sad about it.
Me too. Me too. We're just gonna go mourn, but we're gonna talk later because you're gonna watch The Promised Land. Then you're gonna text me.
I'm watching The Promised Land. I'm doing it today. I'm just so delighted to know this exists in the world.
I
And
know.
listen, I feel like you telling me this, I'm going to look back on this day and I'm going to say, Lord, that was the kindest thing that happened to me today.
Oh, I just
Was that Molly told me about the Promised Land.
yes. I mean, we're gonna both like just anticipate the full season being released in the spring. Yeah, but they're
Yes.
literally filming it right now. So
And maybe Molly, maybe we start to work on a musical. Maybe Molly, I don't know how to write music, but I'm willing,
I
Lord.
do.
I'm willing.
I mean,
Okay, well, here you go.
I don't say I know how to write. I know how to write songs. I'm not like
Okay,
yeah, but I mean, I can
that's
sing
a
and I can play the
start.
guitar. So I feel like we're, and I did musical theater in high school. So
Okay.
I went to college, a musical theater major, and only lasted a semester because I was actually interested in doing comedy. And my theater professor, this is a story you probably didn't actually need to know, but my theater professor, like my academic advisor in the theater department, was like, I see that you are doing, like, he was one of those, like, I see that you're doing the campus sketch comedy group. And he was like, you have to choose whether you want to do real theater or the mockery of the theater. And I remember saying, like, well, I'm choosing the mockery of the theater. And then I changed my degree to English. Anyway, but all that to say,
Welcome.
love musical theater. And so we are
Tell you,
called.
I don't know if you know this or not, but we are real musical theater nerds in this house.
Yes.
We make pilgrimages to New York once or twice a year. I mean, pilgrimages. And we take in some musicals. Now, my husband actually really, he likes plays. He likes dramas. He's thoughtful.
Oh, deep and
he's logical. I want to see you get on that stage and I want to see you tap dance like your life depends on it. I want to hear your harmony. I'm telling you what, there's not much in this life I enjoy more.
Okay. I have to ask then, like, what is a recent musical that you've seen that you just like can't stop thinking about?
Oh gosh. Okay. It just depends on our time frame.
Okay.
Now, I would say in the last year, the musical that I saw that I did not expect to resonate with me like it did. I've actually seen it twice, but it's not on Broadway anymore. Shucked. I loved
I haven't
Shucked.
heard of it.
It was hysterical. It's touring. There's a touring company now.
Okay.
That's doing it. You would love it. It's delightful.
Okay.
I also love Some Like It Hot. I thought it was fantastic. Also not on Broadway anymore. So I think I kind of saw a bunch of stuff and then, it all went away. But I think my all-time, like, the musical of my heart is Dear Evan Hansen, which is not, funny, but it is the musical of my heart. I mean, even more than Hamilton, it lives right here all the time.
Right here.
And I may have to go listen to Waving Through a Window right after we finish recording.
I love it.
So
I love it.
We got to go see that with the original cast. So we got to see Ben Platt in it. And I kept looking over at my husband going, how are we getting to see Ben Platt? How are we even getting to see Ben Platt in this? And it was magic. So,
my gosh, I'm like living vicariously through that experience. Sophie, this has been a delight and a treasure. We're going to go down a lot of rabbit holes, like researching Jelly Roll as a member of the party. I mean,
if nothing else, we've taken people on a ride today, Molly. We've taken people on a ride, and blessings to whoever puts together the show notes for this episode.
I love it so much.
Because it's going to be an adventure. It's really going to be a deal.
It really is. Coincidentally, her name is Molly too. It's not me, but Grace edits the show and Molly does my show notes, and blessings to them because
I was going to say, Molly, my apologies. My apologies.
I love it. Okay, Sophie. So everybody listening, please go get this book, A Fine Sight to See, Leading Because You Were Made for It. Sophie, this was a joy and a delight. I just adore you. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Molly. I appreciate it.